Final Fantasy XI released all the way back in 2002, so it's been almost 20 years since its original release, and boy does it show how old it is at times. Hell, as soon as you hit the play button on Steam, you can see how convoluted the sign-up process is alone. Freaking play online, what is this thing? Oh god! First, you gotta redeem the code for the game, then download the Play Online launcher, which you then use to create a Play Online account that you register in order to connect to 11 servers, but before that, you gotta make a Square Enix account, which is completely separate from a Play Online account. Like, oh my god, Square, can you please get your shit together for once? But honestly, signing up to play the game is only half the battle. Then, you start the actual game. And oh boy, being convoluted is Final Fantasy XI's biggest plus, but it can also be its biggest con at the same time. Obviously, I have mixed feelings about my time with Final Fantasy XI so far. On the one hand, it's such a unique experience that exploring its world and figuring out quests can be genuinely fulfilling, because of the fact that there's literally zero hand-holding from the very start of the game. In most MMOs, you got an NPC telling you to go to X coordinate at Y location to talk to this specific NPC that will then give you what you need to run back with a great big ol' arrow pointing you exactly in the direction that you need to go. In Final Fantasy XI? Okay, good luck kid, go figure out what to do on your own. There are no quest markers, arrows, or anything like that directing you on what to do. Even for me, when I had started up the game, I was left running around the starting city wondering what in the hell I needed to do to get my bearings and actually start making tangible progress. And even when you do start to get the hang of how things work in Final Fantasy XI, things are slow going, and making progress in order to feel rewarded can take a bit more time than most MMOs. Whether you like that or not is entirely subjective, and personally, I found that aspect very appealing. So many MMOs hold your hand and give you rewards and mounts right off the bat, so it was refreshing to play 11 and not be treated the same way. Instead, 11 slapped me in my face, spun me around, gave me an onion sword I didn't even know I could equip, and said have fun. Apparently, Final Fantasy XI was designed with developers wanting to encourage player cooperation as much as possible. So the idea was to make things so convoluted that the only thing you could really do to get anything done was to rely on other players and network with other people who may have figured out what to do already. This is why playing Final Fantasy XI with a guide, or an experienced player, or even just asking for help within the in-game chat is a literal must. On the other hand though, the fact that Final Fantasy XI is so convoluted can become extremely frustrating, and I can definitely see how this game isn't for everyone. The problem really starts to become apparent when it's not just the game itself that's convoluted though. For one, the controls are pretty ass. I had to use the keyboard exclusively in order to play the game somewhat seamlessly, as the mouse controls to move the camera around are like trying to fly a freaking airplane. Oh, and every time you want to pull up the map, type /map. Every single time you have to type /map. Oh my god, that gets annoying real fast. If you're planning on playing Final Fantasy XI, get the Windower app, it's an absolute must. It makes the game borderless windowed, and also adds a few nifty little features into the game, like a minimap for example, that becomes available for use to make traversal in the world of Vanadil just a little bit easier. Outside of the crappy controls and weird issues that come with this being an almost 20-year-old game, I do like the fact that the game was designed with a figure-it-out-together mindset. If you compare this to Final Fantasy XIV, half the time I was playing A Realm Reborn, I was playing by myself. And even when I would try to play with others, most of the time, the main scenario quests required me to be on my own. In 11, you're definitely encouraged more to interact with others, and playing solo is definitely discouraged. Now, that's not to say playing solo is impossible. Whenever I play MMOs, what can I say, I'm a Kirito. However, when I say you can play solo, I mean you can use these things called trusts that summon NPCs to be your party members and help you in battle. Kinda like those NPC White Phantoms in Dark Souls. Pro tip, just don't throw the trust scroll away for Valanriel like I did, because you can never get that item back. that's another thing. You're going to make stupid mistakes like that while playing Final Fantasy XI. It's just inevitable. As weird and quirky as playing 11 was though, I can definitely say there were aspects I absolutely loved. The combat honestly reminds me a lot of Dragon Quest X's combat, and if you ask me, both systems blow 14's combat out of the water. Something about building up your TP gauge to unleash a devastating blow on your enemy is just super satisfying. That's not to mention, Final Fantasy XI is actually balls to the wall hard. I died multiple times in my first couple hours of playing, and I cannot say that I did the same in A Realm Reborn. This makes journeying to different towns or venturing outside of the city a genuinely fearful endeavor, so you better make sure you're prepared for anything before venturing out into the wild. On the flip side, I could see this getting annoying at higher levels when you start to get deducted experience for dying and you lose hours of progress. But thankfully that doesn't start until level 31, so the game is somewhat forgiving at first when you die, before expecting you to really start to come into your own. Also, gear progression is apparent from the very start of the game. At level 1 I looked like this, and at level 22 I looked like this. You see me, I got the iron sword going, the headgear on, the leather armor, and there were plenty of other people around that had even cooler looking gear, and I was going, damn, I want to look like that. And I always think that's a good sign whenever you're making sure an MMO is going to reward you with epic looking gear to really fulfill your epic fantasies. Another thing that I found commendable about Final Fantasy XI was the fact that there are different weapon types that your hero can equip right off the bat. You're not locked to any one weapon. Sure, different classes have an array of weaponry that they're allowed to equip, but as a warrior, I eventually decided I want to try out having a two-handed sword. Or you could go with hand-to-hand combat, or the traditional sword and shield. I liked that, because with so many different options, no one person is going to be using the same weapon, even if you're the same class as someone else. Then there's even the option of having a subclass, which you have to level separately from your main class, so you can really pick and choose how you want to optimize your character for combat. The story is really nothing to write home about, but it's intriguing enough to keep you somewhat interested. I definitely wasn't skipping dialogue like crazy just to get through the cutscene like I do in most MMOs, so I think that stands for something. One thing I do want to touch on is the player population in this game. Obviously, there are going to be less people playing Final Fantasy XI in 2021. Certain areas of the game can feel pretty barren of players, especially the first few starting areas. But whenever I was in the major cities, it seemed like there were a healthy amount of people running around. So I do think that it wouldn't be impossible to find people to group up with to help out with content if you really needed it. I was playing on the Asura server, as that seems to have the most people that are still playing the game in North America. Overall, Final Fantasy XI was a very unique experience. Whether you end up liking it or not entirely depends on whether you like that old school MMO experience. A lot of things are not explained within the game, the controls are outdated and feel clunky, and enemies will chase you across the map endlessly and will kill you without fail if you aren't strong enough. But if you can see past all the mechanics and controls that have begun to show their flaws because of time, you'll find something truly special here. Well, those are pretty much my views on Final Fantasy XI. If you guys enjoyed the video, make sure to like and subscribe, because I plan on streaming the game here on the channel. So if you'd like to see live streams of me playing 11, subscribe, ring-a-ding that bell, because otherwise I'll start playing Final Fantasy 13 instead. You guys don't want to see that, trust me. Oh, and you can ride a freaking crab in this game. Of course it's a 10 out of 10.